The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 47th floor, blurring the city skyline into a wash of silver and gray. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the towers, its low growl seeping through the glass like an echo of something ancient. Inside, the office gleamed with precision. Mahogany desk polished to a mirror sheen, monitors glowing with stock prices, and the faint hum of servers running below the empire that Nathan Blake had built from nothing. He sat perfectly upright in his custom titanium wheelchair, posture straight, jaw tight, the picture of composure. The world saw a visionary, youngest self-made billionaire in Silicon Valley history, the boy genius who had turned lines of code into a $12 billion empire. The headlines called him the man who redefined the future. But in the sterile silence of his office, Nathan Blake felt less like a visionary and more like a ghost. The digital pen hovered for a moment above the glowing tablet. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Blake, the final contract is ready for your approval." He didn't answer right away. His reflection in the glass stared back at him. Sharp suit, cold eyes, a man perfectly composed on the outside. Below the desk, the dark fabric of his trousers concealed the truth. 2 lifeless legs that hadn't moved in 3 years. He tapped his signature onto the screen with mechanical precision. "Send it," he said. His voice carried no triumph, no satisfaction, just the hollow rhythm of duty. A $1 billion deal. Another empire expanded. And yet the only sound that filled him was the rain, the relentless tapping that seemed to whisper all the things he refused to hear. He turned toward the window, watching the raindrops trace crooked paths down the glass. Beyond them, the city pulsed with life, cars crawling like veins of light, umbrellas blooming in the streets below. Somewhere out there, people were living, walking, running. He wondered if they knew how precious that was. A faint hum broke the silence again. "Mr. Blake," his assistant said gently, "the car is waiting downstairs." He pressed the button to end the call and wheeled himself toward the elevator. The quiet whir of his chair followed him like a loyal shadow. He had lost count of the number of hospitals he'd visited, of the specialists who promised breakthroughs and offered only sympathy, stem cell therapy, neural rewiring, robotic exoskeletons. Each failure had carved a deeper scar across his faith in miracles. As the elevator descended, he stared at the reflection of his hands resting on the steel arms of his chair. Once those hands had held a woman he loved. Once they had held the world. Now they only held him upright. The doors slid open to the lobby's marble floor and the smell of rain swept in as the glass doors parted. His driver hurried forward with an umbrella, but Nathan stopped him with a curt shake of his head. He rolled forward into the storm, letting the cold drops strike his face. For a brief second, he imagined what it might feel like to step into the rain again, to feel the earth under his shoes, instead of the unyielding wheels beneath him. And then, as lightning flashed across the sky, something strange happened. A flicker of warmth shot through his right leg, quick, faint, like the static shock of a forgotten nerve waking from sleep. His breath caught. He froze. He waited for it to come again. It didn't, probably nothing. A phantom sensation. His doctors had warned him it would happen sometimes, his brain tricking him with echoes of what used to be. Still, the moment left him shaken. Nathan looked out across the glistening city, his reflection blurred by rain and glass. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the cynicism and the sorrow, something stirred. Not belief, no, he'd buried that long ago, but perhaps the faintest tremor of what came before it, a whisper. A question, what if? The rain had not stopped by the next afternoon. It fell in thin, relentless sheets, soaking the city streets until every reflection shimmered like liquid glass. The world below Nathan Blake's penthouse seemed distant, like a dream he'd once had but couldn't wake into anymore. His driver guided the car through traffic, the hum of the engine soft beneath the sound of rain drumming against the windows. Nathan sat silently, his face half lit by the gray glow outside. The tires hissed against the wet pavement as they neared the hospital. Another appointment. Another round of words he could already hear before the doctors even spoke them. "We're sorry, Mr. Blake. There's nothing more we can do." He clenched his jaw and forced himself not to think, not to remember, not to feel. The light changed. The car slowed to a stop at an intersection. That's when he saw it. A small crowd gathered on the sidewalk near a worn brick building. Faded letters above the entrance read, "St. Catherine's Orphanage." Nathan's eyes drifted to the commotion. Through the rain-streaked window, he caught sight of 3 boys surrounding a little girl no taller than their shoulders. She stood her ground, fists clenched, her small body trembling not with fear but defiance. The largest boy held something above his head, a battered old teddy bear with one ear missing and a crooked button eye. "Give it back, Tommy," she shouted. Her voice cut through the storm, sharp and steady. "That's mine." The boy laughed and tossed the bear into a puddle. The crowd of onlookers, mostly passing pedestrians, didn't move. They just watched. Another small injustice on another ordinary day. But Nathan didn't look away. Something about the way she stood, wet hair plastered to her cheeks, chin lifted like a tiny soldier, gripped him. "Stop the car," Nathan said suddenly. The driver hesitated. "Sir, we'll be late for your—" "Stop the car!" The tires screeched slightly as the car pulled to the curb. Before the driver could react, Nathan had already pressed the control on his wheelchair. The door slid open and the lift began to lower him into the rain. Cold water splashed his shoes as he rolled forward across the sidewalk. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was calm, but something in its tone made the boys freeze. The leader, Tommy, shifted awkwardly, eyes flicking from the expensive suit to the gleaming wheelchair. Nathan's reputation wasn't unfamiliar, even to children raised on rumor and whispers. Tommy mumbled something under his breath, dropped the teddy bear, and ran. The other 2 followed. The girl bent to pick up her bear, brushing mud from its fur. "You shouldn't have scared them," she said simply, turning her strange violet eyes toward him. Nathan froze. Those eyes, bright, unnatural, deep as twilight, looked right through him. Not the way people usually looked at him with pity or discomfort, but as if she could see him, his pain, his guilt, the darkness he never showed the world. "Thank you, mister," she said, squeezing the teddy bear tight. "What's your name?" Nathan asked. "Emma. Emma Chen." She studied him for a moment longer, then added with innocent certainty, "You're sad." Nathan let out a small, surprised laugh. "You're very observant, Emma." "But not about what people think you're sad about," she continued, frowning slightly as though searching for the right words. "You're not sad because you can't walk. You're sad because you stopped believing in impossible things." Something cold and electric ran through Nathan's chest. Her words landed like a whisper from somewhere he'd long forgotten. He tried to respond, but his throat tightened. "What makes you say that?" he managed. "Because your heart looks tired," she said softly, placing one small hand on the metal armrest of his chair. The moment her skin met the cold titanium, a faint warmth spread through the steel, pulsing upward like a heartbeat. Nathan gasped quietly. A tingling sensation, soft, almost imperceptible, moved from the chair into his spine. His fingers tightened against the armrest. Emma smiled, unbothered by his shock. "I'm going to help you walk again," she said with the calm conviction of someone stating a fact. Nathan blinked, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. "Emma, that's not how it works. I've seen every doctor. They don't know everything." Her voice was quiet but sure, the kind of voice that silences storms. "Some things can't be fixed with machines. Some things need hope." Before he could reply, a woman in a nun's habit hurried out of the orphanage, calling out, "Emma, what on earth are you doing?" "Sister Mary," Emma said innocently. "I was just talking to him." The nun's eyes darted to Nathan's chair and her face paled slightly. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said quickly. "She doesn't usually—" "It's fine," Nathan interrupted, his gaze never leaving Emma's face. "She's quite something." Emma turned to go but paused halfway through the door. "Meet me tomorrow," she said, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Behind the old oak tree at sunset," Nathan frowned. "Why?" "Because that's where miracles grow." Then she was gone, disappearing into the warm light of the orphanage hallway. Nathan sat there for a long moment, rain running down his hair, staring at the door where the strange little girl had stood. He looked down at his hands and the shock hit him. His fingers were still trembling. The warmth that had passed through his body hadn't faded. For the first time in 3 years, Nathan Blake felt something other than pain. He felt a spark, something alive, something he couldn't explain. And deep inside, a single thought began to form, fragile but unstoppable. What if she's right? The next day dawned gray and heavy, the sky a vast stretch of iron clouds that seemed to press down on the city itself. Wind hissed between the skyscrapers. and the streets below looked as if they'd been drained of color. But Nathan Blake, who had built a world of silicon code and ruthless precision, couldn't focus on business that morning. Every email felt meaningless. Every meeting, a script he'd already performed 1,000 times. His mind kept circling back to the little girl with violet eyes and the way her touch had made the metal of his wheelchair hum with life. He had told himself it was nothing more than static, a trick of nerves and weather. He had to. Believing anything else was madness, but logic could not explain what had happened. He hadn't felt warmth below his waist since the accident, and yet, last night when he lay awake listening to the rain, he could swear he'd felt a pulse. A faint vibration somewhere deep inside his legs, as if something sleeping there had stirred. By afternoon, his resolve to ignore it had collapsed. He canceled his meetings, ignored his assistant's protests, and ordered his driver to take him back to St. Catherine's orphanage. When the black sedan pulled up beside the old building, the world seemed eerily still. The rain had stopped, but the air was damp and cool. Children's laughter drifted faintly from the backyard, carried on the wind. The building itself looked even smaller in daylight. Its cracked bricks and sagging roof a fragile shelter against the city's glass and steel giants. Sister Mary Catherine was standing by the steps, trimming the withered roses that bordered the entrance. Her eyes widened when she saw Nathan. "Mr. Blake," she said, setting down her shears. "I didn't expect you to return." "I'm looking for Emma," Nathan said simply. The nun's hands froze midair. "Emma?" she repeated cautiously. She's resting. It's been a long morning." "Resting? She sometimes gets tired. More than she should for a child her age." Sister Mary's voice faltered. "You didn't tell her anything strange, did you?" Nathan's brow furrowed. "Strange?" "About walking. About healing. She's imaginative." The nun forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She says things she doesn't understand." But Nathan noticed the tremor in her voice, the way her gaze darted toward the orphanage windows as if afraid someone might be listening. "I'd like to see her," he said firmly. "She's out back," the nun admitted at last, her tone resigned. "By the oak tree. But please, Mr. Blake, whatever she told you, don't encourage it." Nathan didn't respond. He maneuvered his chair around the side of the building, the gravel crunching beneath the wheels. The sound of the city faded behind him, replaced by the gentle rustle of wind through branches. The oak tree stood at the edge of the property, massive, ancient, its gnarled roots crawling over the ground like the veins of the earth itself. The afternoon light filtered through its branches, scattering gold across the grass. Beneath it sat Emma, cross-legged on a patchwork blanket, her teddy bear perched beside her like a silent guardian. She looked up as he approached and smiled, a smile so pure, so unshaken that Nathan forgot to breathe for a moment. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I almost didn't," he confessed. "But you're a hard person to ignore." Emma giggled softly, patting the blanket beside her. "You can sit here if you want." He positioned his wheelchair nearby. "Emma," he began carefully, "yesterday, when you touched my chair, something happened." She nodded as if she already knew. "You felt it, didn't you?" "Felt what?" "The light," she said simply. Nathan frowned. "Light? It's what's inside everything that's broken. It just needs to be reminded it can shine again." He studied her face, the calm certainty, the unblinking confidence. "Emma, what you're talking about, people don't just heal like that. Not from what I have. My spinal cord was completely severed. It's impossible." She tilted her head, thoughtful. "Impossible doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means nobody's done it yet." Nathan stared at her. He wanted to argue, to bring reason back into the conversation, but the words caught somewhere in his throat. "May I touch your legs again?" she asked. Something in the question, the quiet reverence, the lack of hesitation, made his heart pound. "You can try," he said finally, his voice barely more than a whisper. "But I won't feel anything." Emma knelt in front of him. Her small hands, pale and delicate, rested gently on his knees. The air seemed to change. The wind stilling, the sound of children fading, the world narrowing to the space between them. Then it happened again. A low vibration, like the hum of distant thunder, rippled through his body. Heat flooded his spine, spreading outward in waves. His breath hitched. The sensation was faint at first, then sharper, real, undeniable. He gasped, eyes widening. "I can feel that," he whispered. Emma didn't move. Her violet eyes glowed faintly now, the light within them pulsing with each heartbeat. "That's your body remembering," she murmured. "It's been sleeping too long." Tears filled Nathan's eyes before he could stop them. He hadn't cried since the night of the accident, when he'd watched the world go dark from the driver's seat of a car that spun off the road. But here, under the oak tree, with a little girl and her broken teddy bear, something inside him cracked open. Emma looked up at him and smiled again, soft, knowing, impossibly kind. "See? The light never left you," she whispered. From the orphanage window, Sister Mary Catherine watched with trembling hands, her rosary clutched so tightly it cut into her palm. She whispered a prayer, but it wasn't one for healing. It was for protection, because she knew what Nathan didn't yet understand. Every miracle Emma gave took something from her, and the price was always the same. The wind swept through the city that evening like a whisper from something unseen, curling around glass towers and empty streets, carrying the scent of rain and coming change. The sky was a bruised shade of violet, streaked with the last gold threads of the dying sun. Nathan Blake sat alone in the back seat of his black sedan, staring out the window as the city lights flickered to life. He wasn't a man easily shaken. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals, survived public scandals, and rebuilt empires from ruin. But what he'd experienced beneath that ancient oak had left him trembling. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't a dream. It was real. He'd felt it. Warmth, sensation, life. The doctors had told him he would never walk again. The scans, the surgeries, the endless procedures had all confirmed it. His spinal cord was beyond repair. And yet a child, a 7-year-old orphan with violet eyes, had done what the world's top neurologist could not. As the car climbed toward his penthouse tower, Nathan's mind refused to quiet. He had felt heat and movement in his legs. Not once but twice. Something impossible had happened. And the strangest part wasn't that it had worked, it was her. Emma Chen. She hadn't hesitated, hadn't questioned, hadn't doubted for a second. She had spoken as if she already knew the outcome, as if she had seen it before it happened. When he reached home, the silence of his penthouse pressed down on him. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline. 1,000 stars of electric light glimmering in the distance. The city he'd built. The empire he ruled. But for the first time, the vast space felt empty. He rolled to the edge of the window, staring out into the abyss of skyscrapers and rain-washed streets. "Who are you, Emma Chen?" he whispered. That night he didn't sleep. He couldn't. His mind became a machine again, an unstoppable storm of data and analysis. He called his chief of security, ordered an immediate background check on St. Catherine's orphanage and its residents. By dawn he had files spread across his desk, glowing softly in the dim light. The results chilled him. There were no records of Emma Chen's birth, no medical file, no legal adoption papers, nothing. It was as though she'd appeared out of nowhere. Sister Mary Catherine's documents listed her arrival 3 years earlier, brought to the orphanage by an unnamed woman who vanished the next day. No trace of the woman was ever found. Nathan leaned back, his chest tightening. Every instinct he'd honed as a businessman screamed for logic, for proof. But logic had already failed him. His world was made of numbers, not miracles. And yet the faint tingling still lingered in his legs, pulsing like a heartbeat. At sunrise, he made his decision. He would go back. By the time Nathan returned to St. Catherine's that evening, the air had changed. The city seemed quieter, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The orphanage stood still beneath the fading light, its old oak casting long shadows across the courtyard. Emma was there, waiting, just as she had promised. She sat on the same patchwork blanket, her teddy bear tucked under one arm, the other hand pressed gently against the grass as if she were listening to the earth breathe. "You came back," she said, smiling when she saw him. "Of course I did," Nathan replied, rolling toward her. "You didn't exactly give me a choice," Emma giggled, her laughter soft and musical. "That's because you were meant to." "Meant to?" She nodded, brushing her fingers over the grass. "The oak tree told me you would." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "The tree told you?" She looked up, perfectly serious. "Everything alive has a voice, Mr. Blake. Most people just forget how to listen." Her words hung in the air like mist. Strange, poetic, and yet, true. Nathan didn't know whether to smile or shiver. "Emma," he began carefully. "I don't understand what you're doing. When you touched me, I felt something. That's not possible. No one can just walk again?" she interrupted gently. "Not by themselves. But the world can help if you let it." Before he could answer, the wind shifted. The branches above them stirred, scattering gold leaves into the air. Emma rose slowly to her feet, her worn yellow dress fluttering like a candle flame. "May I try again?" she asked. Nathan hesitated. The memory of that electric warmth, of something awakening inside him, flashed through his mind. He nodded. Emma stepped closer, her small hands trembling slightly. The light from the sunset caught her eyes, turning them into deep pools of violet fire. She knelt beside him again and placed her hands on his knees. The world seemed to pause. The air thickened. Even the wind held still. Then the light came, not from the sky, from her. A faint glow radiated from her palms, soft and golden, spreading into the air like ripples in water. The warmth returned, stronger, more deliberate this time. Nathan's breath hitched. He could feel his muscles responding, faintly twitching beneath her touch. "Do you feel that?" she whispered, eyes closing. "Yes." Nathan gasped, his throat dry. "God, yes, I feel it." The energy climbed through him like a living flame. His spine, long dead to sensation, buzzed with impossible life. His heart pounded as tears blurred his vision, and then as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Emma slumped forward, her breathing shallow, the glow fading from her eyes. Nathan's joy turned instantly to fear. "Emma," he cried, reaching for her. "Emma, what's wrong?" She smiled weakly, still catching her breath. "You're getting stronger," she murmured. "That's good." He knelt beside her, panic rising. "You're shaking." "I'll be okay," she whispered, clutching Mr. Buttons to her chest. "It just takes a little of me each time." Nathan froze. "What do you mean, a little of you?" She didn't answer. Her eyelids fluttered, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw her skin shimmer faintly with light. From the orphanage porch, Sister Mary Catherine appeared, her face pale as snow. "Mr. Blake," she called out, her voice trembling. "Please step away from her." Nathan looked up sharply. "She's not well." "I know," the nun whispered, crossing herself. "She never is after she gives." Nathan's blood ran cold. "Gives what?" The nun's voice cracked with something that sounded almost like fear. "Her light." Nathan turned back to Emma, who now lay motionless, the last rays of sunset flickering across her face. He reached for her hand, and a single question thundered through his mind. What kind of child could carry the power to heal the broken and survive it? And somewhere deep within him, something darker whispered back, "What if she can't?" The storm returned that night. Thunder cracked over the city like a voice trying to wake the dead, and rain fell in sheets that shimmered under the glow of streetlights. Nathan Blake couldn't sleep. Not after what he'd seen, what he'd felt. Every nerve in his body hummed with restless energy. His legs twitched involuntarily, subtle but unmistakable. He had tried to dismiss it as adrenaline, as muscle spasms, but the truth refused to stay buried. His body was waking up, and the one person responsible for that miracle was a frail 7-year-old girl who had collapsed in his arms beneath a tree. He had carried her inside the orphanage himself that evening, ignoring Sister Mary Catherine's protests. Her small frame had felt weightless, her skin warm and trembling, her pulse flickering like a candle in the wind. He had laid her gently on the infirmary bed, her teddy bear placed beside her. She hadn't stirred once. Now, hours later, Nathan sat in his penthouse staring at the storm, his reflection flickering in the glass. He'd faced competitors, hackers, senators. He'd survived them all with logic and money. But now logic had abandoned him. There was no equation for what Emma had done, no formula that could explain light spilling from her hands or a body long dead suddenly remembering how to live. He turned his chair toward the table where a file lay open. The orphanage report his investigators had compiled. He'd read it a dozen times already. Still no trace of Emma Chen's parents, no medical history, no birth certificate, just a single note written by Sister Mary when Emma had first arrived 3 years ago. The child was left at the gate during the storm. She was dry when we found her, dry in a thunderstorm. Nathan ran his fingers through his hair and let out a shaky laugh. It was absurd, unreal. And yet the memory of her glowing eyes, of that impossible warmth crawling up his spine, was more real than anything he had ever built in his empire of metal and code. His phone buzzed. The screen lit with a message from Sister Mary Catherine. "She's awake. You should come." By the time Nathan reached St. Catherine's, dawn was breaking through the thinning storm clouds. The sky burned pale gold as he rolled through the orphanage's courtyard, the scent of wet earth and roses clinging to the air. The children were still asleep. Only the creak of the old oak branches broke the silence. Sister Mary met him at the door, exhaustion etched into her face. "She's been asking for you," she said quietly. Nathan followed her down the narrow hallway. The smell of candle wax and antiseptic filled the air. When he entered the infirmary, he stopped. Emma was sitting up on the bed, her legs tucked beneath the blanket, Mr. Buttons in her lap. Her face looked paler than yesterday, but her eyes, the strange, luminous violet, were as bright as ever. She smiled when she saw him. "You came back again," Nathan exhaled shakily. "You didn't give me much choice, did you?" Emma tilted her head, thoughtful. "You're feeling it, aren't you?" "The tingling," he blinked. "How do you know that?" "I can feel it too," she said softly, touching her chest. "It's your hope." "It's waking up," he wheeled closer. "Emma, I need you to be honest with me. What are you doing to me? How is any of this possible?" She looked down at the bear in her lap, her small fingers tracing its worn fabric. "It's not something I do," she whispered. "It's something that happens. When I want someone to be okay, sometimes they are. But it always costs something." Nathan's pulse quickened. "Costs?" Sister Mary stepped forward sharply. "That's enough, Emma." "No," Nathan said, eyes narrowing. "She deserves to be heard." "And so do I." The nun hesitated, then crossed herself. "Mr. Blake, you don't understand. Emma's not like the others. She's special. Ever since she came here, strange things have happened. Flowers blooming in midwinter, sick children healing overnight. But every time she helps, she gets weaker. It's as if she's—" Her voice broke, giving parts of herself away. The room fell silent except for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. Nathan's breath caught as he turned to Emma. "Is that true?" Emma looked at him and smiled faintly, a sad kind of smile that didn't belong on a child's face. "Everything that lives has light, Mr. Blake. When I share mine, it makes someone else shine again. That's how the world balances itself." He felt the words hit him like a blow. "You're telling me you're dying to make others live?" Her eyes glimmered with something ancient and peaceful. "Dying isn't the right word, I just fade a little each time." He reached for her hand without thinking. It was cold, colder than it should have been. His heart tightened. "Emma, you can't do that for me. Not for anyone. You're just a child." She looked out the window where sunlight had begun to slip between the clouds. "The sun doesn't choose who it shines on," she murmured. "It just shines until it can't anymore." Nathan turned to Sister Mary, anger and fear clashing inside him. "You've known this was happening?" Tears welled in the nun's eyes. "I've prayed every day for it to stop. But how do you tell a child she can't be what she was born to be?" A sharp pain cut through Nathan's chest, not physical but deep and raw. The same man who'd built machines to mimic miracles was now watching one destroy itself for him. He wheeled back, trembling. "No, I won't let this happen. There has to be a way to help her." Emma shook her head slowly. "There's only one way to end it," she said softly. "You have to stop needing me." The air in the room thickened. Nathan's voice dropped to a whisper. "And what if I can't?" She looked at him with a kind of infinite sadness that only the very pure, or the very doomed, ever carried. "Then I'll keep fading until there's nothing left." Lightning flashed again in the distance, illuminating the room in ghostly white. Sister Mary bowed her head. "You asked me once if I believe in miracles, Mr. Blake," she whispered. "I do, but I also believe that every miracle the world gives, it takes something back." Nathan stared at Emma, his mind spinning. Outside, the storm returned, heavier than before. The wind howled through the oak tree, and in that moment, he knew with terrifying certainty that her next act of light, her next miracle, might be her last. The storm had quieted, but the silence it left behind felt even louder. The world outside St. Catherine's seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the kind of tension that comes before something irreversible. Nathan Blake sat by the orphanage window, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. The city glimmered below in fractured light, street lamps shining through a curtain of mist, car lights trailing like comets through the night. Behind him, the faint ticking of an old wall clock marked each passing second like the slow heartbeat of fate. Emma was sleeping in the infirmary again. Her breathing had grown shallow, each inhale softer than the last. Sister Mary Catherine prayed quietly at her bedside, fingers trembling against her rosary beads. Nathan couldn't pray. He didn't know how anymore. He pressed his palms against the wheels of his chair and rolled closer to the window. Every inch he moved felt heavier than the last. His body ached, not from pain, but from a kind of guilt that had no cure. He had spent the night watching the monitors in his penthouse, reviewing every neurological scan, every test result. The images didn't make sense. His spinal cord, which had once been described as severed beyond repair, now showed faint patterns of regeneration, neural activity, connection. It shouldn't have been possible. And yet here he was, feeling things he wasn't supposed to feel. Sensation had returned to his legs. He could move his toes, just barely, but it was enough to remind him of the one truth he couldn't ignore. Emma's miracle was real, and it was killing her. When dawn came, it was gray and cold. The orphanage children shuffled sleepily into the dining hall for breakfast, their laughter echoing faintly through the halls. Nathan wheeled toward the infirmary door again, but Sister Mary intercepted him. "She needs rest," the nun said gently, blocking his path. "I just want to see her." Sister Mary's voice lowered, trembling. "She doesn't have much strength left, Mr. Blake. Whatever she's doing for you, she can't keep it up." Her words hit him harder than he expected. "You think I don't know that?" His voice cracked, the composure he always carried fracturing like glass. "If I could take it back, I would. Every second of it." The nun sighed and stepped aside. "Then tell her that." Emma was awake when he entered. Her violet eyes, once bright and luminescent, now glowed faintly, like dying embers in the dark. She smiled weakly when she saw him. "You came again," she whispered. "Of course I did." He tried to smile, but his voice betrayed him. "You didn't give me much of a choice." She giggled softly, though it quickly turned into a cough. He rushed closer, panic tightening his chest. "Hey," he said, reaching for her hand. "Take it easy." Emma's fingers were ice-cold, fragile as paper. She looked at him with that strange mix of innocence and ancient wisdom. "You're walking soon," she said simply. "You'll see." "Stop it," he said sharply, more to himself than to her. "No more of that. No more healing. You need to rest." "But I want to help you," she whispered. "That's what the light is for." "Emma," Nathan said, his voice trembling. "If helping me means hurting you, then I don't want it." She smiled sadly. "That's what everyone says right before they get their miracle." He shook his head. "You don't understand. I've spent 3 years chasing false hope. I don't need a miracle anymore. I need you to live." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, maybe even gratitude. But behind it was something else. Acceptance. "Do you remember what I told you?" she asked quietly. "The light always balances itself," Nathan frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means it doesn't disappear," she said softly. "It just moves." Before he could respond, the wind howled outside, rattling the infirmary windows. The air shifted, colder, heavier. Sister Mary burst into the room, eyes wide. "She's getting worse," she cried. "Her pulse is dropping." Nathan froze. He turned back to Emma. Her face was pale, her breathing erratic. "Emma, stay with me." He gripped her hand tighter, his panic breaking through the shell of calm he'd built his life around. Her eyelids fluttered. "It's okay," she whispered. "The light's almost done." "No," Nathan shouted, voice breaking. "You're not done. You hear me?"
"You're not."
Then without warning, a jolt of heat surged through him. The same warmth as before, but stronger, wilder. It raced from her fingers into his skin, through his arms, his chest, his spine. Pain erupted in his legs, and pain so intense he almost screamed. And then, impossibly, he felt everything. His toes curled. His knees twitched. The shock tore through him, but all he could see was Emma, trembling, fading, her small body illuminated by a faint, unearthly glow. "Emma, stop," he begged. "Please stop." But she only smiled, her lips barely moving. "You can walk now," she whispered. "Promise me you'll never stop walking for others." And then, silence. The light in her eyes went out. Nathan fell to his knees beside her bed. not in his wheelchair, but on his own feet. The movement was unsteady, trembling, but real. He collapsed forward, clutching her lifeless hand, tears streaming down his face. Sister Mary's rosary slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. "Oh, merciful God," she whispered. Nathan could barely breathe. "Why?" he choked. "Why her?" Outside, the storm broke open again. Rain poured down like the sky itself was grieving. Through the roar of thunder, Nathan thought he heard it. A whisper, soft and warm as the light that once filled her eyes. "Now walk for those who can't." The next morning, news broke across the world. Billionaire Nathan Blake walks again. But the headlines told only half the story, because while the world celebrated a miracle of science, Nathan knew the truth. His healing wasn't man-made. It was love-made, and somewhere beyond the veil of rain and light, a little girl with violet eyes was smiling. The world was awake before Nathan was. Sunlight spilled through the glass walls of his penthouse like liquid gold, illuminating the city far below, a city that now whispered his name as if he were a legend reborn. The billionaire who walked again, the headlines read. The news anchors called it a modern miracle. The medical community called it an anomaly. But Nathan Blake knew better. He didn't need science to explain what had happened. He had felt the miracle in his bones, and he had watched the price of it die in his arms. 3 months had passed since the storm. The world celebrated him. Investors doubled their bids. His company's valuation soared. The public saw a man resurrected, confident, composed, radiant as ever. They saw the perfect image of success. What they didn't see was the man who woke every night gasping for air, haunted by the memory of violet eyes fading into darkness. The mornings were the hardest. He would rise before dawn barefoot and walk to the window. His reflection stared back, strong, whole, healed. Yet every step he took still echoed with Emma's voice. Walk for those who can't, he tried. God, he tried. He funneled millions into medical research, donated to children's hospitals, even founded a foundation in her name, the Chen Foundation for Miracles. It became his new obsession. His empire no longer built technology for profit, but technology for hope. And yet none of it eased the guilt. None of it quieted the storm inside him, until the letter came. It arrived on a quiet spring morning, hand-delivered by one of the nuns from St. Catherine's. The envelope was sealed in faded wax, addressed in careful, looping handwriting, to Mr. Nathan Blake from Sister Mary Catherine. Nathan tore it open. The paper trembled in his hands as he read, Mr. Blake, I know you've carried Emma's memory as heavily as I have, but there is something you must see, something I did not have the heart to tell you before. Please come to St. Catherine's before sunset. Come alone, Sister Mary Catherine. He read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully, as though afraid the words might vanish if he blinked. By evening, he was standing once again before the orphanage gates, the same gates where he had first seen a tiny girl defending her teddy bear in the rain. The old oak loomed in the courtyard beyond, its branches swaying gently in the dusk. The air smelled of spring rain and roses. Sister Mary met him at the door. She had aged since he last saw her. Her eyes were hollow, her voice quieter. Thank you for coming, she said, leading him down the candlelit corridor. I wasn't sure you would. Nathan followed her silently. What is this about? You'll see soon. They stopped before the chapel, small, dimly lit, the air thick with incense. Candles flickered along the altar, their flames dancing like ghosts. In the center stood a marble plaque engraved with a name, Emma Chen, 2016-2023. She gave her light to heal the world. Nathan's chest constricted. His knees almost buckled. He sank to the pew before the plaque, fingers trembling. I thought she was buried. She was, Sister Mary said softly, but miracles don't stay buried. He turned toward her, confusion and grief clashing behind his eyes. What are you saying? The nun stepped aside and gestured toward the back door of the chapel. Come with me. The garden behind the chapel had changed. The winter frost that had once killed the roses was gone. In its place bloomed a sea of color, hundreds of white roses glowing faintly in the moonlight. The air itself seemed to shimmer with something alive, and beneath the old oak tree, sitting quietly on the grass, was a little girl. Her hair was longer now, her dress clean and new. Mr. Buttons lay in her lap. For a long time, Nathan couldn't move. His throat went dry. "Emma?" The girl turned, and his world stopped. Those same violet eyes looked back at him, and calm, endless, filled with the kind of peace that defied words. "You came back," she said, smiling. Nathan stumbled forward, barely breathing. "It can't be. You promised you'd keep walking," she interrupted softly, tilting her head. "You did, didn't you?" He knelt before her, tears already streaming down his face. "I did, Emma, every day," she nodded. "Good. Then you don't have to cry anymore." He reached for her hand, warm, real. And yet something about her touch felt lighter than air. Not like flesh and bone. "Like light. Are you real?" he whispered. Her smile deepened, but her eyes shimmered with something eternal. "As real as what you believe in." Behind them, the oak's branches rustled as if stirred by wind, though the air was still. The petals from the roses began to fall, swirling around them like snow. "I thought I lost you," Nathan said, voice breaking. "You didn't lose me," Emma whispered. "You found me. You just needed to see the world with your heart again." The moonlight broke through the clouds, flooding the garden in white gold. For one impossible moment, Nathan swore he saw her glow. Soft, radiant, her form slowly blending into the light that surrounded her. "Where are you going?" he asked, panic tightening his chest. "Where I was always meant to," she said gently. "My light was never mine to keep." He shook his head, clutching her tiny hand tighter as if that could anchor her to the earth. "Please don't go." Emma smiled one last time, the same serene, fearless smile she'd given him the day they met. "Don't be sad, Mr. Blake. The world still needs people who believe in impossible things." And with that, she stepped back. Her body shimmered, her edges dissolving like sunlight breaking into mist. The wind stirred again, carrying the faintest echo of her laughter. Then she was gone. Nathan stood there beneath the oak tree, the night silent around him. He looked down at his hands, at the rose petals glowing faintly where her light had touched them. He dropped to his knees, the weight of the moment crashing over him. Above him, the wind whispered through the branches. It carried a single phrase, faint, soft, unmistakable. "Keep walking." He looked up at the stars. And for the first time in his life, Nathan Blake smiled, not the polished smile of a CEO, not the hollow smile of a man with too much wealth and too little peace, but the smile of someone who had seen the divine hidden in the simplest of miracles. The world would remember him as the billionaire who walked again, but Nathan Blake would remember himself as the man who met the little girl who taught him to believe. And from that night onward, every step he took, every child he helped, every life he touched, was a prayer made in motion, not for himself, not for fame, but for the violet-eyed angel who had once whispered, "I'll help you walk."